Welcome to Inside Voices, a well-read magazine, Between the Pages podcast. I'm Robert Gwaltney, joined by my dear friend and co-host, Jeffrey Dale Lofton. Jeffrey and I are really excited to have the opportunity to enter into conversation today with author Lo Patrick. Welcome, Lo.
Hi, thank you so much.
We're so happy to have you here. So, Lo, before we get started, I'm going to share a little bit about you with our listeners. Lo Patrick is a former lawyer and current novelist living in the suburbs of Atlanta. Her debut, The Floating Girls, earned a starred review from Publishers Weekly, was a finalist for the Townsend Prize for Fiction, and was a Reader's Digest editor's pick. It was named by the Georgia Center for the Book, a book all Georgians should read. She's also the author of The Night the River Wept. Her latest novel, Fast Boys and Pretty Girls, was published July 8th, 2025. Jeffrey?
Hello, it's so good to be in conversation with you. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to meet you as I've heard a lot about you.
Excited to meet you too. Why don't we start by having you discuss A Pretty Girl? Your protagonist, Danielle Greer, she's really layered. She's a mother, former model, an emotionally haunted woman. Tell us how her voice found its way to you.
Um, this novel came about because I had worked in the modeling industry in Los Angeles when I was young and during kind of a very transformative period in my life. I was working with a lot of other young girls who were similar in age, who were kind of country mice coming to the city and were totally disoriented and destabilized by the sophistication of the industry and sort of their all the attention they were receiving for something they really didn't have anything to do with, and kind of the way that I saw them floundering. Some, of course, did great and, came through it unscathed and probably better people for the experience. But I just saw a lot of young women and men who got a little bit off track because of their the way that they got picked up into modeling. You usually fall into that. It's rarely something that somebody is like wakes up and like, I am so gorgeous and wonderful in every way and I'm going to be a model now. Usually people are telling you that you should. And so I was just intrigued with the whole business and really the interpersonal stories, especially of the young girls and watching them. They're from all over the world, but the common thread was that they were usually from some sort of rural background, or not necessarily rural, but certainly like we didn't have a lot of girls from LA or New York or these bigger cities. They were kind of plucked from obscurity. And that just stayed with me as just something that I thought was fascinating. And so Danny, I just tried to imagine, a girl from Georgia as I know it, and how it would affect her, especially the going back and forth between various worlds. In the book, she's at home in a very small town in North Georgia, and then she's in New York City, and trying to go back and forth between those different worlds. And at her age, a very fragile age, and she, her decision making is erratic and flawed and emotional. And I find her to be very realistic, whether or not she's someone that you want to hang your hat on. I think that is it from my observation, pretty much how it would go. So, and then her as an adult was just someone who never really got past the formative experiences because I don't think she was allowed to figure out who she was. And and to have her these interests or these passions that we all kind of come into. We go to college or we have an internship or something that helps us figure out, who we are. And she just kind of, as a lot of people who deal with something traumatic, got stuck in that not great period of time. And so I just found all of those themes very interesting, and that I would figured out a way to encapsulate them in a single character. And so I think I've answered your question. I
Yes,
can
absolutely.
I can go on for days. So if you need to like you can just throw up an X or something, like stop talking. So,
No, that was perfect.
Yeah.
oh, thank you. Mhm.
Well, so we talked about, a favorite topic of mine, pretty girls, but let's switch to another favorite topic of mine, fast boys.
Mine too, Robbie. Come
I
on.
know. So specifically, let's talk a little bit about a character in your book, Benji Law. What do you think make characters like him so captivating, even dangerous? What draws you to them?
Well, it's what, and I've had some questions from readers. Like, what could she possibly seen in him, and why would she become so, fixated on him? And that's like the whole point is that there wasn't, it was a flaw or an absence in her that made something like Benji so appealing. And that it was, she was trying to capture something, he was from home. And I think, initially it was just he was like a really good looking kid riding around on a motorcycle without a shirt on. I mean, who among us cannot, can tear ourselves away from the appeal of that? And it was also that, he responded to her and there was so much rejection in New York. And then she was getting this feedback at home, this, her worth. And she convinced herself that he was really interested in, her modeling and wanted to move to New York with her. And she was introducing him to this world, taking him shopping and all these things. And he wasn't really particularly impressed with any of it. He was just there for a good time. And Robbie, you and I have talked about this. I think that sometimes that apathy is like the most appealing thing when it's an unrequited love situation, is it's like, you know, if you're looking to figure out what your worth is or what your value is, you're probably going to go to all the worst spots to find it, you know, until you don't. And until you actually, feel your worth or your value. And I think that she just had a lot, the rug pulled out from under her, being this kind of country girl. And then all of a sudden she was supposed to be so special and she wasn't really. And so she was doing anything that she could do to, feel appealing. And so his appeal was, I think, had a lot more to do with her than him having any actual appeal, other than just being this hot kid on a motorcycle, you know.
Right. What also occurred to me when when reading the book is that it also was sort of a, a sort of power too. She had the means and the ability to be able to keep him in a certain way. And I think that she liked having and possessing, that agency, not that she didn't necessarily have over herself so much, but having it over someone else.
So insightful. Definitely. Like she got to be the fancy New York people to him. It
Right.
was like, and I kind of played at this. I didn't want to play at it too much, but she got picked, so she kind of picked him. Like,
Hmm.
in the same way that, she took him over to the agency to like show him off. Like, isn't he so hot? And they were all like, he's like a country bumpkin. Um, yeah, she was kind of playing at the adults in her world. She was kind of playing at their role. They were taking her around and, wining and dining her and telling her how great she was. And so she was like, "Oh, I'll do that to this kid from my hometown and that'll give me, like you said, some power." And so yeah, poor Danny. Poor Benji, really, but yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
mentioned the home life a moment ago, and so the dynamic between Danny and her mother is challenging. Will you share a little bit about Danny's mother and the nature of their relationship?
Yeah, so I think, most mother-daughter relationships have their challenges. And especially this case, Deb, Danny's mother, was used to being this kind of, firecracker, like, strong presence, and she ruled the roost. And then, these people come in and there's the model scout, and he kind of takes that her role away from her. And then Daniel's not even going to live in that town anymore, and they don't have much of a say over what she's doing, and they don't know what she's doing. And I think that that's kind of everybody was thrown off. And I imagine that that's what it would be like, if you went from total obscurity to like living in the center of the New York fashion world. Your mom, who was always, she was this like kind of ball busting, and she suddenly seems like like a dumbass. Pardon my. So I think that she was fighting for this respect from Danielle, but also didn't really have it for herself because she didn't know what Danielle was doing and she couldn't offer anything to counter it. Like, well, you shouldn't do that. You should come home here and I don't know. So she was really, put in a difficult situation, as all parents are at some point, various points, to, like, well, I love my kid, but I don't agree with anything my kid is doing or the direction their life is taking. And how do I maintain a relationship with my kid while being in constant disapproval? And I think that that was like the crux of their relationship. And, I relate to that from being a young, kind of rebellious. I was more rebellious in my early 20s than I was in my teens, but, you know, I want to do my thing and, nobody was going to tell me what to do and that's just really hard on a parent, especially a kind of an overbearing parent like Deb was. She was overbearing with everyone in her life. She ran that house in that small town, like, so, and she was a lot more significant than I think she even meant to be. So,
So the novel Low moves between 2004 and 2019. I have trouble writing one timeline. Talk a little bit about your approach to writing across two timelines.
I don't know why I like that so much. I really like that. It's in my next book as well. It's going back and forth. I guess I just it's very cinematic in a way. I think when I'm thinking about it, I'm like fading into this scene and instead of wanting to have it just be a memory or a section of like recollection, I want to be in the middle of it. And so I write first person. That is definitely my preferred way to write. And I think that that just calls to it because I want to tell you how they're thinking and what they're thinking in that moment and get that voice right for where they are in their life. Um, because we're all such different people at different phases of our life. So I enjoy, if I'm really excited about writing a character, I want to write them in different parts of their life and I want to hear their voice in that part of their life and I want to, see the world the way they do and know their insecurities. And I just think it's easier to do the two timelines and get in their heads more than just, recalling like, well, with my wisdom now, or just at this age. So I just love it. And my next one has it too. And I started working on something else and I'm also, so I may not be able to do, my publisher might be like, okay, like that's enough of the multiple timelines, but I do really enjoy writing that way. And I find I like reading books that are like that too. I mean, not exclusively, but I'm not put off by that at all. I'm usually intrigued by it. So
I think a lot of readers enjoy the dual timeline, and it is extremely popular now
yes.
too.
Yes.
So,
That's what my mom would say, too popular. Like, she doesn't love all the dual timelines and stuff. And I'm always like, you know, writing another
well,
one, Mom.
well, you did it beautifully, and I
Thank
think that because of the story, just the nature of the story, I very much love to see that sort of juxtaposition, that contrast between who she was and who she is now.
Sorry. I'm on the phone. Sorry.
Yeah, so
You
so
didn't get my
you're
note.
also so you're also so we were just talking about moms,
Yes.
Yeah.
right?
And I'm
Yeah,
like,
you were just talking about moms. So I'm gonna just sort of I do want to ask this one question, and
but I
um
missed what you said before, and I apologize. I could hear his footsteps coming, and I was like, he didn't see my
no, 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 that's fine. We're glad he could join us.
note.
Um,
He's a cutie.
so I had the opportunity to meet Lowe's children at Poe and Company bookstore a few weeks back, the night that the book launched.
Yeah, it was fabulous, Robbie. Thank you so much for that.
Good looking kids. On the topic of kids, like, so you got three books out in the world right now,
Yes.
and you're going to have a lot more books ahead of you. But of the three books, and I know that your children, they might not be age appropriate now, but if you could pick one of those three books, for your children to first read, which one would you want them to read? Is that a hard, would that be a hard decision?
The first one, The
First
Floating
one.
Girls. Because she's 12. So other than her language, um, the topics are very dark, but I could get around that. The second book, there are dead children, which is really, it'd be hard for me to imagine them reading that. And then this one, I just wouldn't want them to think that I, sanctioned any of this behavior, so the first one would be because she is 12, my protagonist Kay is 12, so I could like justify that. But it'll be a while. They've asked, they always ask what it's about, but it's such dark topics, and so um, sooner than later, they're going to be reading them. So,
They will be. I would imagine it would be a really interesting thing to have a parent who um, is a writer. I mean, I would have, as a boy, would have had a tremendous amount of curiosity about that, and I'm sure that I probably would have been sneaking around reading.
And
yeah, I
fun.
mean, I think they're interested. They're getting older. They've been so young that they don't. They're becoming more interested. They're becoming much bigger readers. So we were at Book Miser today in Marietta, and they were picking out books and stuff. And so I think, as they mature, they're going to be a lot more interested in what exactly it is I'm doing in here all the time. So,
Sure.
Lo, I want to go back a moment to the timeline, the dual timeline, 2004, 2019. And I was interested in the challenges or the freedoms that you experienced writing a story rooted in teenage love that then, goes into adulthood.
well, I think because she doesn't really had Danielle come out of this teenage experience into a really like well-adjusted, fully formed adult. I mean, she certainly tried to. They had a family and but she's very damaged adult. And so I think that I found that to be more realistic than her really pulling through just based on everything that had happened and kind of all the relationships that had deteriorated around this tragedy. So, it's easy to write a troubled teenager because I think that's how we see teenagers as very confused or young adults, very confused, lack of experience, poor decision making. I exemplified all of these traits for much longer than I should have. And so that's kind of how we look at people that age anyway. But adults, our expectations change. And so I think, even if we're disappointed in something like a 19-year-old is making all these decisions and we're disappointed, but we're kind of like, youthful indiscretion. When you look at an adult, you expect them to have moved past this type of behavior or to have like worked through whatever it is that's holding them back. And so I think that it was actually a little bit more difficult to write Danielle as an adult because we would want her to have a better perspective on things. But I just didn't think that she would. I didn't think that she had that stunted growth and then she moved back home and then it just, that was kind of it for her, like advancement. So I can't remember what your question was, but I think you were asking about like, yeah, it was easy to write Danny as a mess. It was a little bit more challenging to write the adult, like still a mess because you don't want her to be, but
Yeah. It's more as a storyteller, I would think it's more interesting. It's more juicy. So,
yeah, yeah,
not a
definitely.
mess.
Absolutely. The readers want her to be a mess.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, right, and it's more like I always say like I don't write, Hallmark movies or I don't write Snow White. Like I haven't seen a lot of that in my life. Like I haven't seen a lot of like terrible tragedies, but I've seen a lot of just real people with, that haven't necessarily like overcome all odds and, most people are dealing with stuff and are deeply flawed. And the more you get to know them, the more you're like, my God, I can't believe this person can even hold down a job. But that's the interesting stories to me are the ones that are kind of like around the background of a person. And, I wouldn't just dismiss someone as being like a mess. I would be like, well, why are they a mess? Like, I gotta know, what happened?
Yeah.
And,
What happened to you?
yeah, what happened to you to make you this way?
Well, and they're the most interesting characters, that those layered characters, those deeply flawed individuals, because as you said, I mean, most folks are flawed, right? And they can see bits and pieces of themselves. And sometimes I think perhaps when you can see yourself in popular culture and arts and literature, the world isn't quite so lonesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, oh God, I'm just like that. I lay around, by the
Oh,
conditioner, falling asleep every day,
I mean, yeah, I mean, so what I loved about, Dani is that, she moves back home into this old Victorian home that she grew up in, her childhood home. She has where she lives with her husband and her daughters, and she just sort of languishes in the air conditioning,
Yeah.
uh, while her children romp out and frolic outside.
Yeah, they're running around in the woods and she's falling asleep next to the air conditioning. But like what southerner doesn't know what it's like to lay in a
Mm.
really air-conditioned room when, I mean, come on,
I well, there's something sort of magical about a window unit. In
Yeah,
my grand
Mm, I
in my
agree.
Granny Louise's house,
totally agree.
when I was a boy, the whole home, this little brick cottage of a home, was cooled by window units, and
Or just
it was a
one.
combination of the sound,
Yes. The rattling.
the
Like a
sound, the rattling, and just
hurricane.
how cold those things can
It's
get in a small
amazing.
space.
Some of the apartments, and when I lived in Miami, believe it or not, did not have central air, and
Mm.
they would be the window units. And I mean, the places that were cooled with the window units were like the place to be. It was like ice box in there. It was amazing. So yeah,
Well, I love, like when it goes off cycle and it turns off, it sort of kind of lets out this very dramatic sputter, which I love. Like, "Pow, pow, 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 pow."
Falling down the
yeah,
stair.
I'm a big fan too. I'm a big fan too, Robbie.
Love them. I'm sure that we're fascinating anyone that might listen to this. So let me get off topic of window units.
Window units.
Window units. They're a good thing if you've not experienced them.
Yeah, and I wrote about window units in my book, so I'm the one.
Well, I loved you even more, when I read that. Um, so obsession, memory, identity, secrets, we talked about first love, all thematically play central roles in this novel. I mean, what draws you to these particular emotional landscapes?
I think probably because those were the landscapes that were the most profound to me. I didn't have like, I meet a lot of people and they were very career oriented or they were, struggling their way through school and grinding it out in the library. And I mean, I did all of those things, but the experiences that were the most profound or that left the largest mark on me were the interpersonal, the relationships, these feelings of rejection or disappointment in yourself. I feel like there's disappointment in other people is one thing. Disappointment in yourself is pretty, like a rocket. So, and being an overly nostalgic person, I definitely understand kind of living in memory and obsessing over things that have already happened, but it's a little bit like comfortable shoes. I know how I feel when I think about that. And so I think sometimes people who are having trouble moving forward, their obsessions are the past and these kind of negative things in the past because they're always getting the same response. I know exactly how I'm going to feel when I think about him or when I think about that, rather than moving forward and trying to, put themselves in a different situation and experience a different emotion or, a different type of conversation. And so I do find that very interesting that we find comfort in, trouble that we had and we experienced. And so, that played a part in it that she, as much as she didn't really seem to want to move on from it, I think because it was just easier to wallow in it for her. the relationship with the husband wasn't quite, and she had the daughters that she was letting run out in the road, but she loved them. But she wasn't really getting anything from any of that that was as meaningful as this kind of turbulent time in her life. And so just like putting on like really comfortable flip-flops, she just kept returning to it. And I think that's a lot of times that's the obsession, is it's not really like someone's, obsessed with this person. They're just sort of obsessed with that feeling. It's just being very familiar. So,
You know,
Nostalgia and living
yeah,
in memory. Yeah.
yeah. It makes me, I mean, it certainly resonates and it really feels, I know it happens to everybody everywhere in the world, but it really feels like a small town situation, a small town sort of insular kind of cloud over one. So in your novel, you explore how small town communities, bury secrets and that mystery that surrounds it. And you even wrote a piece for Crime Reads, Closeness Breeds Contempt, on small town mysteries. And there's a quote I wanted to read. The minute something really bad happens in a small community, locals start to wonder where the rot came from. Why are you drawn to writing about small towns? And what do you think readers like about it?
well, part of me actually thought today, I wonder if this is going to be like a fading genre, because the internet has brought so much, information, and you're not, you can order anything. It used to be there's this kind of isolation living in these small towns. You were away from other things. You couldn't have certain types of experiences because there just weren't enough people to have them with, or stimulation, like sound stimulation, everything just gets a little bit turned down. Life moves more slowly. People are more in your business because there's not any other business around to be into. And so I wonder, with how like interconnected everything is now, if it's going to be the same experience growing up in a really small town. I did not grow up in a small town, but I observe them. It's one of my favorite things, is to kind of, people watching is like everything to me. And going up into the mountains, or the foothills. I've been corrected by people who are like from Colorado. So the foothills in North Georgia. Watching the lives there that have, I don't know, either by geography, by design, by desire, are just more isolated. Like, this is a very specific life. It's not as distracted as, say, like my life is here in suburban Atlanta. There's no getting away from things. And there's sometimes not anything to go toward. So I think that people do, get kind of stuck in patterns, relationships, the kind of idea like this is what life is like. And I remember going to see my grandma in a small town in Michigan, and it was just like, but this is what we do. This is what life is, and this is how we live it. And it wasn't that she wasn't aware of other things, but that wasn't happening there. And so, if you don't have a particularly adventurous spirit and that you want to move away or go and have all these other experiences and bring them home with you, you're just going to kind of stagnate. Now, that's not to say if you live in a small town that you're stagnating, but I think the wrong type of personality who is around too many people who know them and know their history, they get kind of stuck in, well, this is who I am, and this is what my life is like, and this is what my family is like, and this is how we are. And maybe don't get a chance to explore. But I love the small town life, and obviously people love reading about it because it's very romantic. I've told Robbie, and he's from an extremely small town. um I
And
wrote.
so is Jeffrey.
Oh, you are, Jeffrey? Where are you from?
Um, Warm Springs, Georgia.
Oh, so I have a very romantic view of it. You wouldn't know that from my writing, because I usually write about all the really, horrible stuff that can happen in these small communities, and how much more of an effect it has on a small community than it necessarily does in a big city. But I have a very romantic view of the life there and the simplicity. And Robbie set me straight a few times, but so it really, I suppose my work is not a reflection of actually the way that I see it, but I can definitely see, like, you make a noise in a small town, it's a lot louder then, you make a noise where I live. So.
No,
Yeah.
well, I think that, as a boy, when I think back about growing up in a small town up to a certain age, you know, that small town is a universe, really. And
Yeah.
it seemed large. As you get older, in your early teens, adolescence, you begin to sort of see the challenges that come with small town living, especially if you a boy on the fringe. Jeffrey and I were both sort of those young peculiar boys in small southern towns.
I love young, peculiar boys in small southern
Well,
towns. Not as
well,
young as I, yeah, so.
and we love you, right? We we love the people that loved us.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, there are romantic elements to small town life and things that I'm very fond of and things that I look upon fondly. But it's just like anywhere else. There are going to be challenges, and especially when you're contained and everyone knows everyone, and yeah, so there is a certain element of romance to small town living, but it ain't all that it's cracked up to be.
Well, the vibrations, everybody feels the vibrations. It's because there's just not so much other noise. And so I think that's, you feel more like a spectacle, or I definitely can understand that. It's kind of like, being in school or something. Like when you're in, middle school, your entire world is middle school, and you think that all these
Mhm.
things are so important and everybody knows everything about you and all, and then you move on in your life, and you're like, my God, I don't even talk to any of those people ever again. And so I think it's just that insular, that you're kind of in this bubble. It can work it can work in a good way, and then it can work in a bad way as well. So,
Agreed. Well, if I would not be the person or the writer I am today if it had not been for those early experiences in that small rural community in Southwest Georgia. So I'm very grateful to have grown up with the family that I had and grew up the way that I did.
and boy, can you write it. I mean, it's beautiful. It comes, just the cultural, I mean, it comes out in your writing so beautifully, and it's hard to capture it honestly. So,
Well, and Jeffrey does it beautifully as well in his debut novel, Red Clay Susie.
it's behind him on his shelf, I saw.
It is.
It is.
Hey, oh my goodness.
It's on
You're,
my TBR, Jeffrey. I didn't even know what TBR was, but I have a TBR now. So
I'm
She's
glad you
got an
have.
official TBR.
I've got a
That's
TBR.
the
There it
place to
is. Yeah.
be.
I saw it there and I was like, oh, that's on my TBR.
So there's a mystery. There are secrets in this book that are slowly revealed over time. Did you know when you set out to write this book how the book was going to end?
No,
Mm.
no. Like had it, I wanted it to have it to be a tragedy. And then I wanted it, of course, to be a mystery. I love a mystery element. I don't necessarily write like, whodunits, but they're more mysterious type of books. So I love a mystery element. And so, yes, I wanted there to be a lack of information, kind of this willful ignorance, in response to a tragedy that, that is really what left it hanging over their heads for so long. Had it been resolved properly when it happened, then maybe Danielle would have had a chance of moving on with her life. But no, I did not know how it would end. I had an idea. I get to a certain point where the beginning is always just flying by the seat of my pants, and then I start moving, and then there's like a moment of like I know what's going to happen, and then I start writing toward that moment. But
Mm.
I don't usually write toward that moment until very late. And then I have a lot of editing to do once I figure out, because it's like nothing else, everything else has to be changed now that I've figured out what I'm actually writing about. So,
Robert and I have a fellow friend and author, Jody Hobbs Hessler, and she calls, and I don't know if she came up with it, but she calls it writing. So the flashlight method, I think you can see only as far as you can see with a flashlight in the dark.
I
Mm.
like that. I
And
like that.
you go only as far forward as you can see, and you progressively get to the end. But I love that you didn't know when you started.
No, they've got like my characters. I always say this, and it makes me sound like I've got some sort of mental, but I might. My characters tell me, like there's a certain point when they like tell me what happened. So I'm usually getting to know them. Like I'm editing something right now and there's just a lot. They make me, and they make me. My editors work with me to make my manuscripts better and we trim a lot because as I'm getting to know my characters, I kind of overwrite their, everything that's leading up and it's hard for me initially to trim a lot of that, but later I'll see that it was just me getting to know my characters and getting to know like how they would react or, if this happened to them, what would that mean? And so, yeah, they've got to tell me, but I do get to a certain point when I know. It's not like I'm the last chapter and I'm like, you know what? I think I think that's gonna be, that's the end. But I don't start writing toward like to the end point until very late. So yes, my flashlight, I must need new batteries because my flashlight didn't go very far.
Well, I mean, I totally relate to that approach. I mean, I have these guideposts, so I have a sense of where the story will go. But there is a point at which I think for me, if I knew everything that's going to happen, it wouldn't be exciting to write it.
Mm.
Because,
Yeah.
for me, I'm sort of living the story as I go. And I think that's what makes it exciting. I know that a lot of people that write thrillers and mysteries sometimes will sort of approach writing a story backwards. This is how
Mm.
it ends, and how do I begin the story to get to where the book ends? And um, like you, I just sort of like to discover as I go.
Yes, and I think that I I don't know. I mean, I've never tried that. I've tried outlining like one time, that trip for like 5 minutes. I tried outlining and I was like, okay, never mind. I don't like outlining. Um, so I don't. It's very, as I always say, I don't think it's a very efficient way to work. And I'm sure it's frustrating to my editors, like having to constantly, like, "Hey, should we take this out or should we?" But it is the process. And I guess I stand by it. I think at this point, I finally stand by it. I think I used to be a little bit more like, should I say that's what I do? Now I'm like, that's what I do. So
And it works for you.
it
Yeah.
does. It definitely works for me and, probably wouldn't work for somebody else, but you know, here we're just, I'm getting to the age where like that's what we're doing. I sound like I'm my person this small time. This is how I live my life. So that's how I write my books.
That's how you do it, and you do it well.
Oh,
That's your
thank you.
process. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, Lo, it looks like we've come to the end of our time together. We really love talking with you. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was such a treat for me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And when the next book comes out, we would love for you to come visit us again.
Well, I'd
Absolutely.
love that. And then that time we'll all have cocktails.
Absolutely. It'll be a drinking session.
It'll be a drinking session. God only knows what we'll say.
But
God
before
only
we go,
knows.
yeah, before we go, will you tell us what's next for you?
Yes, I can because we actually already have a cover. It's called The Sins of Summer Daughters, and it's a dual timeline. A woman that she is has her own daughter and a granddaughter. The granddaughter gets into some trouble, which kind of ignites in her, her memories of things that she experienced when she was a young girl and kind of a traumatic upbringing. I don't want to say too much. I'm being very vague because we're still in the editing process, so I'm not exactly sure how I would even pitch this book. But it's set in the South, Middle Georgia, because I did some things in Eatonton and I absolutely love that area. Where's Warm Springs, just really quick?
It's West Central,
West.
halfway
Okay.
down, close to Alabama.
Okay. You might read, I don't know. Might have to make sure I've done this right. But and so it's female protagonists and kind of this struggle, once again dealing a lot with memory and overcoming the past and, coming to grips with the past. So that's about as vague as I can be until we're until we're done with the editing and I know a little bit more how it's going to be presented. But I love it. There's like a little bit of there's some dark characters in it. Some things I haven't done before. There's snake venom,
Mm.
yeah, there's some snake stuff.
Right,
It's
John Roberts, Howie.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
you had me at snake venom.
yeah, there's some snake venom in it. There's some, creepy girl. I mean, I have really, really enjoyed working on it. So I'm hoping that it will, we're getting close on the editing. So I'm hoping it's as good as I want it to be.
I
Good.
can't wait to read it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Love Patrick, thank you so much for joining Jeffrey and me.
Thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciated being here.
Gentle listeners, until next time for Inside Voices, I'm Robert Gwaltney.
And I'm Jeffrey Dale Lofton. And remember, to be creative is to be courageous. Thanks for joining us.